Hey guys, welcome to another Texas Bolt Action Battle Report. Got a really special battle for you today. My friend Greg is coming over, and I don't think he quite knows what he's in for, because I think today's battle might turn out to be one of the funnest, most brutal action-packed battles that we've played on this channel. Today we are going to be reenacting a battle in Tunisia that took place in 1942 in November. Kind of before Kasserine Pass, in a place known to the Americans as Happy Valley. And it's going to involve the 1st Armored, and they are going to be coming up against a German armored column of the 9th Panzer Division. And what that means is that we are playing tank war. And I'm really excited about this because I finally get a game where I can get my entire U.S. armored force out on the table. They're all themed for this battle, and I just had to include almost every vehicle I could crunch into a 1,790-point list, and the Germans have about the same. I think there's a 4-point difference. But anyway, yeah, we're going to be playing tank war today, and I've devised a scenario that is going to give both sides a chance to win, even though the scales are a little bit tipped in the Germans' favor. So I'm going to start with what the Americans are bringing today. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of history. So the Americans are going to be all inexperienced. And what this represents is a portion of Combat Command B, which was known as the CCB, which was part of the 1st Armored Division. They had just gotten finished with a successful battle against the French tanks that were really obsolete and really low on armor. And they had fought them when they had invaded Algeria in Operation Torch, and now they've come to Tunisia, and they've been attached to a British task force that's trying to race for to secure like the coastal high plains, and so they're kind of in central Tunisia. They're part of what's known as Blade Force, and American tank doctrine was yet to be tested in the war at this point. American tank doctrine was not, tanks were not supposed to fight tanks. Tanks were supposed to fight infantry and exploit gaps, and fighting tanks was supposed to be up to the tank destroyers, which at this point in the war, all the Americans had for the tank destroyer was this T-12 HMC with an old French 75mm gun. It's kind of a stopgap measure while they developed other tank destroyers. And tank destroyers were supposed to be like hunters or like, snipers that were supposed to kind of hide. They weren't supposed to just be thrown into battle. But they were put under command of a British general named General Anderson. And they were made part of this force that was kind of a joint American-British force called Blade Force. And because they were under British control, the British tried to use their doctrine to enforce upon the tanks. So the commander of this company was a guy named Daubin, who was in command of a Stuart M3 light tank, although the Americans didn't call them Stuarts, they called them M3s. And there also were a portion of M3 Lees that were attached to the battalion known as just the M3 medium tank. There weren't really any Shermans at this battle. But I can't resist. I had to include some Shermans. They were there shortly after. It didn't take long for the Shermans to completely replace the Lee. However, after Kasserine Pass, which I think we're going to be playing a lot more battles to depict that, most of the Shermans were lost, and their replacements were actually the Lee. So the Lee was active in this theater up until really the end of the theater, when most of them were given to the British and sent to either destroyed, knocked out, given to the British, sent to Australia or the Pacific, or given to the Russians as part of Lend-Lease. They were really kind of obsolete by this point in the war. Anyway, the Americans just kind of had them as a stopgap measure. So that's kind of what we have here to represent Combat Command B, and their orders were to basically defend what's known as the Chewy Gooey Pass. Or at least that's what the Americans started calling it. And it was sort of the pass where the kind of the plains, the Tunisian plains meet the mountainous areas, or what's known as the Western Dorsal. And the orders were pretty vague. It was to create a tank-infested area, and I'm quoting General Anderson on that. So so they were tasked with defending this area, and there was an engagement that took place, I think, around the 24th of November at a small farm, which we've kind of tried to represent here today. And it was really kind of the American armor's first engagement with German armor, and it was kind of their first wake-up call that their tanks were very inferior. After fighting the French in Operation Torch, they really sort of thought that they kind of, that they were kind of the superior tanks in the desert. They really thought they had the best tanks in the world. And they were in for a very rude awakening because they were fixing to become, they were fixing to come into close contact with German 88 millimeter guns and even the new Panzer IVs. So the British thought after many years of fighting in the in Tobruk in the eastern desert that the best way to take care of a tank was another tank. And to a degree, they were right, but they just didn't have the tanks to do it. And the Americans definitely didn't have the tanks to do it. So going against their own doctrine with inferior weapons, inexperienced crews, in high spirits, no infantry support. And today we're going to represent that by, I had to include a little bit of infantry just for flavor. And we're going to represent that by one single infantry crew here, inexperienced, in an inexperienced half-track, with a man with a bazooka who would technically be part of the squad. So it would be kind of we have a 10-man squad here, and an armored infantry squad would typically have a bazooka. This one is a relatively new weapon for the Americans at this point in the war, and so this man has no idea how to use it. So it is also going to be rated as inexperienced. So one other thing is that we're going to be playing some of the tank war rules. And I'm slowly kind of figuring out what I can, make work in a game, what I can remember, what rules I can remember to enforce, and things like that. And one of them that I particularly liked was fighting tank crew. So I've got some American tank crew out here on the table, and they are going to come into play in this battle, and we'll see how that works out a little bit later. But right quick, let me just tell you what the Americans have. I've already spent a long enough time on this intro. We've got a command of inexperienced Stuart tanks, M3 Stuart tanks. They all have the recce rule. They're all loaded to the hilt with MMGs, so they're going to be really good against infantry. But their 37 millimeter guns were kind of characterized as cap guns firing at the German tanks. So we'll have to see how effective they are against what the Germans are bringing. We do have 3 inexperienced M3 Lees and 3 inexperienced M4 Shermans. All 3 of these tanks have a radio network, by the way. So each one has a commanding officer that can give the tanks within that radio network a +1 in experience as long as his tank is alive. We've got the inexperienced infantry and the inexperienced half-track with the inexperienced bazooka. And then we have 2 inexperienced tank destroyers that have been attached from Company A as part of support for this group of tanks. So that's kind of representing the American task force that's in this area around this farm. I'm going to go over here and show you what the Germans are going to have, and they're going to be coming in from this table edge. So we have one regular first lieutenant with his helper. He is traveling in a command SDKFZ with a light AT gun. They've brought a PaK 40 that's towed by an Opel Blitz. There is one regular squad of infantry that's loaded up in an SDKFZ 10. Or 250, and they're going to be trying to hold this farm, as I'll explain later. There are 3 Panzer IIIs. One is the short-barreled version with the light AT gun. The other 2 are the medium AT gun version, and they are medium tanks. There's some crew over here. Some German infantry is going to have to stand in as tank crew because I don't have a lot of German tank crew at the moment. But there is one tank commander here. It's that... I don't remember what the name of that figure is, but he came with the Tank War book, so I'm excited to get him on the table. I've got a resin Panzer IV from Trenchworks, which is a beautiful model, and then I have a resin Tiger 1 from Warlord Games. So I think you know where the points went. There's 4 more points in this army than there are in the American army, but there's only 11 dice to the Americans' 14, and most of it is probably right here in this tank. So we'll have to see if it pays off for the Germans. They're going to be tasked with holding this farm, and there's 2 objectives. Each one is worth 5 points if the Germans can hold it, or 5 points to the Americans if they can take it. There is this point right here that has to be captured by infantry because it's in a building. There's this objective right here in the orchard, which can be held by tanks. And then so the way it's going to work is each of these objectives is going to be worth 5 points. Each team is going to get 2 points for every vehicle that they knock out. And we are going to instigate the fighting tank crew rule, where tank crews can take over their vehicle's command die and join the fight if they wish. However, if they want to just get off the table, they can get 1 point for every tank crew that survives the game. So that's kind of how we're going to be playing this. There's a lot of opportunity there to win in a lot of different ways. And I think it's just really going to be a really exciting battle. I'm really excited about it. I think we've kind of got a quintessentially Tunisian table here. I kind of wish that it was a little bit larger because, this is a tank battle. So we're going to be kind of danger close and it's going to get crowded. But hey, it's a tank infested area. So we're going to go ahead and play turn 1. And actually, I tell you what we'll do. We'll do a deployment. The Americans are going to have to deploy from off the table. So they're going to have to bring in their force. It's a long table, so they're going to be at a little bit of a disadvantage because they have this area to come into the table, and they have that area over there to come into the table. We're going to say that the mountains are impassable to tanks right now. The Germans are going to be able to deploy at least half of their force on this table edge. So they're going to get a certain amount of area to deploy. So I guess what we'll do is we'll do the German deployment, and then we will let you know how it goes. So stay tuned. Looking forward to this one. All right, guys, we're back after a German deployment. Just to show you what the Germans did right quick, they brought on their Opel Blitz, and they have unloaded the Pak 40 up here. It's got a commanding view of the area that the Americans are going to have to come on. There is a Panzer III sitting here behind this rock. There is a Tiger at the back of the orchard who cannot yet see through the entire orchard, but will be able to any minute when he moves up. There is a Panzer III here with the light AT gun kind of parked behind the shed. And then the Germans with their half-track parked over here have unloaded, and they are just kind of hanging out behind the building so as to avoid being seen for now, although they probably will be visible from this approach over here. The Americans are at a little bit of a disadvantage. Well, actually in more ways than one they're at a disadvantage because they have to come on virtually in the open, and then they also, only have these two narrow areas that they can come on the table. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens when American tanks start appearing. So we're going to go ahead and play turn 1, and we will let you know what happens. So stay tuned. All right, guys, we are back at the end of turn 1, and as you can see, the Americans have decided to bring their platoon of Lees over here on this side of the table, and they're just moving 3 abreast through the narrow pass. They've got some infantry to support what little infantry there is. The bazooka has climbed up into this shrub on the hill, and the infantry has positioned itself in these woods. Came under some light fire from the Germans who had moved up into this house. but didn't manage to hit anybody as they were pretty far at range. Meanwhile, the Lees took a shot at this vehicle and didn't manage to hit it, being inexperienced. They were having trouble hitting anything, but they did put a pin on it with their small arms fire. And this tank would have liked to have reacted, but by the time it got turned around, it realized that that vehicle was pretty much in their way. And if that vehicle gets destroyed, it's going to be permanently in its way. So that might have been a poor placement decision by the Germans. The Lees coming on did spring an ambush by this Pack 40 that could definitely see them all the way down there, but they also missed due to it being long range and there being a little bit of cover for that middle Lee. This Panzer III did go into ambush, and it had targets, but it forgot that it was the crew must have fallen asleep or something. And actually, we can roll to see if it can take its shot, because I haven't done that, so we might do that before the next turn. The Tiger rolled up into the orchard and took a shot around the corner there at one of the Lees, but did not manage to hit. So everybody's just kind of starting to get woken up. The Americans are approaching and the Germans are kind of sounding the alarm. Now, one thing I failed to mention is in the actual Battle of Happy Valley, the Germans were actually attacking, but the Americans had attacked initially, so this can kind of be representative of that. Here we have the Shermans very bravely coming on 3 abreast in Flames of War formation, and the Stuarts have moved up kind of cunningly into a position that if they get fired at, they can use their recce ability to kind of take cover around the base of this hill. It reminds me that there was a different attack in Tunisia where the Americans attacked in formation against the Germans, who had flanking AT gun fire. They had 88s, and they said that it looked like the Americans were conducting a field exercise, and that did not turn out very well for the Americans. So maybe it'll turn out a little bit better. There's no 88s on this table. There's no flanking fire, so maybe this is just what the Americans need. But anyway, Greg left some units off the table, and so did I, so they might be coming on this turn. We'll have to see. So, yep, just go ahead and stay tuned. I want to get one more shot of this beautiful American wave of armor here. Hopefully it's not short-lived. But, yeah, we're going to go ahead and play turn 2, and we will let you know what happens. So stay tuned. All right, guys, we are back after the end of turn 2, and man, I wish I could tell you that it was a very violent turn 2 that was littered with burning American wrecks, but it's not. The Americans have moved up in a pretty tight formation, and led by the Stuarts, who all focused on the infantry in the farmhouse, which they could see. They couldn't really see any other German tanks, so they don't really know about any other threats, and they're very, with all the American zeal and gusto, they are firing all of their machine guns over there, and they're actually, even though they're hitting on a 6-on-6, because of their inexperienced crew, all of their wild bullets and all of their machine guns are causing pins over there on the Germans, as you can see, managing to kill a couple of Germans and put 2 pins on that squad, and that actually caused that squad to not be able to fire back. So the Americans are doing really well. Shermans came on after, added to the machine gun fire, really just focusing in on that infantry. They basically just identified a target, and everybody is just wildly firing at that poor German squad. Meanwhile, the 2 tank destroyers are carefully creeping up behind these Sherman tanks. Now, one could argue that they are parked a little bit too close together. Now that they're out there, but they don't know that yet. They haven't seen any tigers or anything in the area, so they're not really paying attention to that. and it really doesn't have much of an effect in bolt action. So I'm just giving it flavor. But anyway, the Pack 40, I sound so corny. I'm like, oh, I'm just giving it flavor. Anyway, the Pack 40 did find a hit on the side shot of a Lee, and that was the first Lee to pull up. And before this Lee met its end, it very bravely put a, no, you know what? I'm sorry. This Lee didn't do much. It actually took a shot at the half track, but missed. And that was actually when the half track was sitting here. Due to its inexperienced crew, it didn't manage to do much, and it took a side shot from the Pack 40, and only one crew member made it out. And Greg has decided to get that guy off the table. So he's left alive after this turn, so he'll be removed. So that's 1 point for Greg. And if you're keeping score, that's 2 points for me for taking out that Lee. However, the second Lee came up, guns blazing, 2 shots. First shot from the light AT gun, nailed the half track, knocked it out, blocked the Tiger's view for now. So if the Tiger wants to do anything about these Lees, he's going to have to pull out of that defilade position that he got into. As you can see, he moved earlier from the orchard, ran over this tree, found a perfect field of fire here, but missed, unfortunately, couldn't hit anything. So that crew is still waking up. Meanwhile, the other Lee came up, still also following the lead from the other tanks over there, and just putting all of its fire into the building here, and not really doing much since it was firing with machine guns and such. Half track's just moving up to support, hoping to go into ambush. Bazooka team moving into the woods here, taking their sweet time. The American infantry just going down, just kind of waiting until the tanks get all of these people out of here. They're kind of actually ironically doing what early American tank doctrine said they should do, which is that the tank should go first, clear out anybody, and then the infantry should follow after. So it's kind of interesting that that's actually taking place before us on the table. The Germans have had a bad go of it because this tank also tried to take out a Lee, but couldn't do it. Finally got into a position to do so, but missed. The German commander has come on, and so there's a possibility that the German commander might be able to get some people, get this team over here rallied, or this squad over here rallied, so that they can do some damage. And his carrier here with the light AT gun has just kind of moved up this way, hopefully to be able to take some shots. This tank fired at the Stuart over there behind the rock, had an open field of vision, just needed a 4 to get it done. Did hit the Stuart, but failed to penetrate because it was at such long range with its medium gun. So really the only kill for the Germans this game goes to this AT gun hitting that Lee down there in the side. I tried to bring on 2 tanks, but they failed their orders test, so they are dilly-dallying. Must be General Arnhem's reluctance to commit more tanks to the battle. Doesn't know what he's facing. So we're going to go ahead and play turn 3. Was this turn 2? This was turn 2. So we're going to play turn 3, and I hope that I can get back to you with some more carnage. And we'll let you know what happens, so stay tuned. All right, guys, we are back after the end of turn 3. And man, really concerted American push. But I want to start with this Lee. It was taken out by, unfortunately, not the Tiger that pulled out and took the first shot, but its support tank, this light AT gun on the Panzer. But that was enough to puncture those weak sides, those riveted sides of the Lee's hull, and knocked it right out. The crew has retreated, and they will be leaving the table, giving Greg another point. So another 2 points for me for taking that Lee out, and another point for Greg for getting that crew off the table. Meanwhile, the infantry is starting to move up, taking advantage of the other tanks moving up. And the half track has also moved up. Every single one of these tanks that could, probably everything minus the tank destroyers for the way everything moved in this like massive push here that is the American armor push, has fired on one thing, and that is the infantry. And in doing so, they have put multiple pins on them and whittled them down to 3 men. However, the officer did move up, and the infantry was able to rally. And I'm really hoping to get them out of that building on the next turn, get them behind it so that they can't be seen anymore. You know what these tanks did? Over here, we had shots taken. This tank tried to fire, did manage to put a pin on the lead Sherman over there, but didn't manage to penetrate, being long range. AT gun fired at the only surviving Lee over there, but missed. So bad rolls, really hampering the Germans. This command vehicle transport moving up, firing its light AT gun at that lead Stuart, which is just around the ridge there, also missing. And really what's hampered me more than anything is that both German tanks are still off the table. So as tends to be the case for me in these like large tank battle games with my reserves, is that they don't make it on the table. And so I'm unable to continue to just like lay down kills on this kind of blob of American infantry. So I'm really hoping on this next turn I can start getting some shots into the Americans. I'm trying, guys. I know you German players are probably saying like, what are you doing? You got a Tiger. But it's really, that crew has just really not woken up yet. They just haven't been able to get a hit. And neither has, neither have any of these tanks over here, and neither have the tanks that are not on the table. So we're going to go ahead and play turn 4, and I'm really hoping that we can get a few more elements of German armor on the table. Ironically enough, this is pretty historically accurate. Arnhem didn't like to commit a lot of his big things to battles, especially if he didn't think he was going to win. It actually, because he didn't really want to commit his Tigers to Erwin Rommel during Kasserine Pass, caused Kesselring to get really upset with him, and eventually kind of resulted in his sacking. Of course, he ended up surrendering to the British because he was forced to stay in Tunisia till the bitter end. But in the meantime, this is where things stand on this table, and we will go ahead and play turn. Hey guys, we are back after the end of turn 4, and this is a little more like it. We've got a little bit more carnage now, as you can see. So the Tiger finally did score a kill against this Lee right here, the middle Lee. Took it out. However, we have one Lee that very bravely charged up and scored a hit on the Tiger, but didn't penetrate. They're finding it really frustratingly hard to hit it. The Tigers support, the Panzer III, tried to take a shot at the Lee, but missed. The Stuart very bravely moved up to that shell hole, took shots at the infantry, whittling them down to 2 men, but the infantry has fallen back, as you can see, after receiving an order from their officer and rallying last turn. And at the cost of that Stuart's side armor, it took a hit from the Pack 40 on the hill and suffered a immobilization. So it's still sitting there with 2 pins immobilized. Finally, the German armor arrived. The Panzer IV and the supporting Panzer III took shots at the Stuart here that had pulled up and knocked out a half-track, the command half-track actually. And the Panzer III sitting back here behind the rocks took that Stuart out, and then the Tiger, I'm sorry, I'm getting confused because there's so many tanks, but the Panzer IV knocked out another Sherman over there. And actually, now that I think about it, I think the Tiger actually had knocked out this Sherman over here. No, you know what? I'm sorry. Well, there's 2 Shermans knocked out over there that I knocked out this. Did I knock out 3 tanks this turn?
You got 1.
So I think the way it worked is, I think Panzer III knocked out the Stuart. The Panzer IV knocked out the lead Sherman there, and I think at the I think at the time, the Panzer IV. I think that the Panzer IV knocked out the back Sherman there, and I think the Panzer III knocked out the side Sherman right there. So I think that to be honest, I'm not even sure. That just kind of like illustrates the madness of this game. But what you need to know is that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 American tanks burning on the field. There's 1 American tank immobilized, and the rest of the armor is moving up. They have been shooting pretty wildly at these tanks, not being able to really take them out. This tank this half track did go up to that Stuart, but the favor was returned in kind. That Stuart also used its machine guns to very bravely attack this anti-tank position and did kill one of the crew, and put a pin. So that is happening. Greg's going to leave his tank crew on the field because he wants to keep the die. So he realizes that now, if he wants to get a point for them, he has to manually move them off. There's a little bit of a time limit on this game now. We hopefully can get through the final turn, or actually this next turn. But there's a chance that, depending on extenuating circumstances, we might have to call the game short before the 6th turn. So either way, it's been madness, and we'll have to see what happens. So stay tuned. All right, guys, we are coming in at the end of turn 5. Not just a whole lot happened this turn, but what's important is that this Lee finally brewed up by a point-blank shot from the Tigers. So the Tiger rallied off its pin, knocked out the Lee. However, what I failed to mention is last turn, the U.S. infantry had loaded into this stationary half-track. And on this turn, that half-track moved up, unloaded the infantry, and they're now pressing hard against this 2-man German team onto the objective. So they're trying to see if they can get up there and make this a American draw at least. Greg withdrew as many tank crews as he could to get those points. I believe there was another Sherman, there was something else killed. I think it was the Stuart, right? The Stuart, yes. I believe it was a side shot from one of these tanks. I think maybe possibly this tank. It's really hard to keep track. I'm just going to be honest.
This guy seems new.
Yeah, I think that's a new casualty. And viewers that are paying attention can tell me if it is. If it is new, I believe it was probably killed by one of these 3 tanks. I can tell you this. The Sherman moved up, took a shot onto the Panzer IV and did put a pin, but failed to penetrate. And I can tell you that all 3 of these German tanks tried to fire at that Sherman, and the one that didn't hit the Stuart missed. There were a ton of 2s rolled this turn. I can tell you that, actually, now I remember. The Stuart actually moved up and tried to fire on this Panzer IV or Panzer III with the light AT gun, and it actually returned in kind and took out the Stuart. That's actually what happened. So we have that. This bazooka team standing behind the burned out wreckage of the Lee tried to fire and take out the Tiger but missed. So that is where things stand right now. That is what we're pressing for. The Americans are just trying to take this position to see if they can get that 5 points that it's worth. Other than that, that's pretty much everything. Man, I don't know if you guys can tell, but I'm having a really good time. This game has kind of rekindled my love for bolt action. So I've got to hurry, though, so that we can play this last turn. So we're going to play that, and we'll let you know what happens. So stay tuned.
All right, guys, we are back after turn 6. And as you can see, the field is replete with wreckage. Let's see if we can figure out what happened this turn in the fray. I know that this Sherman was fired on by multiple tanks and missed again. However, a very lucky tank destroyer back there in the back, as you can see, did get a shot down this lane and managed to knock out a Panzer IV. So the Panzer IV was taken out. That was 2 points for Greg. Luckily, the crew got off the table, so that was 1 point back for me. And we have a couple of Panzer IIIs that really just fired almost as badly as the Americans. And I think it's probably because they know that they probably can't handle the kind of losses that the Americans can handle, and that they are kind of at a loss if they lose any tanks at all. So the loss of that one tank is probably just as rattling to the Germans as the loss of all of these tanks is to the Americans. However, meanwhile, Tiger fired a shot at the tank destroyer and missed. This tank took shots from the bazooka team, which very bravely charged up right to here and missed. And in return in kind, fired all of its machine guns at that bazooka team, and that bazooka team is no more. Meanwhile, the German officer team moved up to the farmhouse and emptied their MP40s into the farmhouse and killed everybody except for the squad leader. So we leave this battle with that objective contested. So the Americans did manage to remove that objective from German control. Meanwhile, these tank crew did not get off the field in time to get any extra points, so they are all kind of stuck there. We have more tank crew fleeing the field over there, and all of them are pretty well stuck on the battlefield. The anti-tank gun also took shots at the tank destroyer in the rear there, but missed. Really, the only other tank death that took place was the Panzer IV. This tank destroyer that has swung around did try its best to take out the the Tiger, and it needed a 6-on-6 to do it. It rolled 1-6, but then it rolled a 5, so it was very close to doing it, but didn't get it done. So if we're tallying up the points, the Americans got, if I'm counting correctly, 1, 2, 3 tank crews off the field. They got 1, 2, 3, 4 German dice, so that means that's going to be 8 points for crew. Let's make sure that that's correct. One for the squad that's dead, 1 for the half-track, and 1 for that. So that is 4. That's correct. So 8 dice plus the 3 crew brings them to 11 points. If you'll notice, there's nobody contesting this objective right here. So the Germans don't get 5 points for that, and they don't get 5 points for the objective on the house. However, they took out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 German vehicles, and that brings them to 16 points. So I think it's safe to say that this is a German victory. And I'm very excited about how the field looks right now. Very excited about how this turned out. How did the actual Battle of Happy Valley turn out? Well, it's pretty interesting. The American tanks managed to take out quite a few German tanks. And because there was a little bit of flanking fire involved, they managed to kind of push back some German Tigers and even take a few of them out. So the Germans did have to withdraw from the field. However, the Americans lost an extraordinary amount of tanks in the Battle of Happy Valley, and it was the first time that they'd really come face to face with the German armor. And after facing the French and feeling like their tanks were kind of the best in the world, they were really kind of brought to heel and kind of humbled by the Germans. And so even though it was a tactical victory for the Americans, it was the first realization that especially the Stuarts were not going to be able to compete with the Germans at close range with their 37 millimeter gun. And even the Lees were going to be considered inferior. The Americans also lost an extraordinary amount of tank destroyers. So they were going to kind of come to the realization that the tank destroyer that they had at the moment was not really able to go toe-to-toe with the Germans like a tank. Later on, the 609th Tank Destroyer Battalion would be really useful against the Germans in the Battle of El Guitar. And if you want to see kind of an example of that battle, you should watch my El Guitar video. In the meantime, this battle, I gotta say, just got me really excited for bolt action again. I know that it's a little cheesy. There's just billions of tanks at close range, and they're all just like a flame on the field. But it was just probably one of the most fun bolt action battles that I've had in a long time. That being said, I'm really, really getting into chain of command. So I'm hoping to do a chain of command campaign really quickly. And because I've got all this desert terrain, I'm really trying to work on a at the sharp end campaign for chain of command that I can kind of fight in Tunisia and kind of tell a story in this theater. But like I said, I think I can kind of like break away in between and do bolt action episodes. That being said, I'll probably do one more bolt action episode before I do chain of command, and that is going to appear on the Paint All the Minis YouTube channel. So I'm going to put that video up there. Don't worry, I'll do a post like kind of like letting you know that that's happening over there. And I will also be sure to link from that video to my channel, and link from my channel to that video. So I'll make sure that it's easy to find for you guys. But if you want to see, what I'm going to be doing is kind of posting the odd video, especially during the campaign, over on the Paint All the Minis website or on their YouTube channel, and I think it also shows up on their website. But the way to see those videos is to subscribe to the Paint All the Minis YouTube channel. And they're also really great to show you painting guides and other battle reports that are just as good as this one. So if you're kind of battle report hungry, that's the channel to check out. I think Tabletop CP has tons of battle reports over there for chain of command and bolt action. And there's also just a ton of other gaming systems. And so it's a really, really great channel to check out. So anyway, that is our battle for today. And I will leave you with a view from the mountaintop as we look at Happy Valley burning with American tanks, just as it did in real life, and burning with German casualties that they probably just really cannot afford to have. So thanks for watching, and as always, please follow us on Texas Bolt Action Facebook group and like and subscribe. But thanks, guys. I will see you soon. Take care.